obviously. So if I see one on a menu that doesn't have lactose and it's under 6%, like, sold. Like, I'll drink that all day. Let's see. I think that Little Machine, good friend of mine, Brett, is the owner and brewer there. And also a lot of what my favorite breweries have in common is their brewer owners. And I think that changes the way that you make beer. I think it changes your business model, and I think, you know, you kind of do it for yourself. So actually all these places that I'm going to name are brewer owners, which I kind of knew, but I guess now thinking about it, they definitely are all brewer owners that are actually, you know, in the dirt every day, making beer. So yeah, Little Machine, I think they're, one of the best, like, when I think about beers, like fruit beers and stuff like that, which are not normally my thing really, I just love the way that he thinks about them. And he had a beer called Raz Against the Machine that did really well in competitions for a long time. And it was such a cool beer. There just wasn't a beer like it. And he's recently, you know, as much success as that beer had, he's recently reformulated. And I think that's really cool to, you know, something that you've been doing for so long to decide that you want to change it up a little bit. And I think it takes a lot of confidence, in yourself and a lot of examination about what the industry is doing. So he thinks about, you know, using interesting ingredients in a very cool way. And I've always admired that. It's definitely not the way that I think about beer, but I know how, like, thoughtful and, you know, there's a why behind it. The guys at Cannonball Creek. Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was going to say, I love that about the different brewers as well, where, like, some of them have been, like, food scientists, and so the way they look at beer is, like, completely different, and they'll put stuff in there that people will read and be like, why are you putting that in a beer? But, and it absolutely can work.
Yep, absolutely. If you think about it and you know, you aren't just doing it to do it, I think that it can be done really well and really thoughtfully. You know, Cannonball Creek up there, they're doing a lot of really cool IPAs. I think their lagers are really quite something too. Hutch and Jonathan up there are, again, brewer owner. Up in Golden are just, you know, doing their thing. And I think every beer, you know, you have from them, they've won a medal in every single competition they've ever, I think except for the very first one. They've won a World Beer Cup, every single World Beer Cup, and a GABF, every single GABF since they've been open, which I think is pretty impressive and speaks volumes of, you know, the consistency there. I have a beer called Trump Hands, which is like a very small IPA, which is quite good as well. Yeah, Netflix and Pills. Excuse me, that was a really good one. They're just cool guys willing to embarrass themselves in any way, shape, or form, which I think is funny on social media. So if you don't follow them, you should definitely follow them on social media. And then my friend Tamir at Novel Strand making what he just calls hoppy beer. They're not hazy, they're not bright. They're just kind of his interpretation of hops in a beer, and him and his wife Chantel own it. And I think, you know, again, he's just kind of a small place doing what he wants to do. Recently put in some lager tanks, which he's really proud of himself for, and I give him lager yeast once in a while. But I think, you know, again, not trying to like necessarily fit into a small group, but just trying to make the beer that you want to make and not necessarily having to follow like a strict set of rules per se, you know?
Right. No, I love that too, because your list there was so wide, and the reasons why you like them is amazing as well. And it's not just, you know, they're cool, they make good beer, but it's like what they're doing with it or kind of helping evolve the beer and brewery scene, just on a small basis up there.
Yeah, for sure. I like, you know, again, we have a lot of cool conversations, and I try to stay up to date on what, you know, the kids are doing these days. And, you know, we just have a mutual respect for what each other does. And, you know, there's a lot of people that I have very lucky enough to call friends and colleagues, and, you know, we'd go out of our way for each other, doing those things. So.
No, I love it. Now, as we're recording this, it's March 1st, which is National Women's Month. What does it mean to you being not only a female brewer, but also a female brewery owner when it comes to, you know, the women in the brewery scene in general?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say like a complex relationship with it, because it's not. It's just what I always try to do is show and be in front and make it more normal just by showing up. You know, like when you see it, then you have to kind of rethink, your instant biases. And I think that's really important, to just kind of like for everybody, men, women, etc. The more people you see that look like you or anything, the more you think it's possible that you could step into like a role like that. Like, oh, it's not just, bearded dudes or whatever, or it's not just, like it's more diverse. And the more you see that diversity and the more that people are, cognizant of it. And I don't mean cognizant of it just like, for a long time there, and I've stopped saying yes to them, only getting invited to be on panels that are about women. And I won't do it anymore. That's not what actual inclusion looks like. Inclusion actually looks like when you have a panel about, let's just say lager or whatever it is, right? Do you have a diverse panel up there? Like, is it all people that are the same age, look the same, the same sex, like, etc. So I think it's imperative when people are, putting together podcasts, putting together dumb listicles or whatever they are, that they're including, what's your favorite, what's your summer trend? Even dumb stuff like that, which, is kind of just clickbaity, but it's important to get like a wide variety of people's opinions. And I think that that's really what like diversity looks like. So if any panel, if you have all people that look the exact same and are from the exact same backgrounds, it's going to be a pretty boring panel. So if you look at that panel and it all kind of looks the same, then you should be like, okay, I should re-examine what this is actually like. So it's a constant like balancing act of drawing attention to it, but also not really wanting to draw attention to it. And just to be normal. I don't want to be the best female brewer. I want to be the best brewer, if you think about lager beer, that it's synonymous with Bierstadt Lagerhaus and it's synonymous with Ashleigh Carter. Like that's what I aim it to be. Not just, what's the best female brewer in, whatever. Like I don't, I think it's time like we kind of get a little bit past that. But I recognize at the same time we're not there yet. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And I am lucky enough which is also kind of a fucked up way to put it, but I'm lucky enough that I have a bunch of people surrounding me that don't care. And so sometimes I forget how bad it can be. And so I have to constantly, check myself and say, okay, it's still not better. There's still work to be done. I still am responsible out there for being a role model and things like that. And I don't do it in the most traditional ways, but I will take anybody's phone call any day, talk to anybody about anything, especially another, young female getting into this industry, and talk about some of the real struggles and some of the real good things. So I've been a beneficiary of it in some ways, just being able to stand out a little bit because of the way that I look, because I'm a woman and there's not that many. But also have the opposite. So it's a constant, tug of war and kind of reevaluation of where we are in this industry. And again, it's not there yet, but I think we're getting closer. And not everywhere either. I live in Colorado. There are places where it is far worse. So work's still not done, but here we are.
Yeah. Exactly. I've heard that as well from other females in the industry, and so that's why I kind of wanted to ask. Also, just because I love your answer too, because I've asked local brewers that happen to be black and owning the first black-owned brewery in the Metroplex, and it's like, well, I just happen to be black. Like I'm a brewer first and foremost, but I also happen to be black. It's not I'm opening this to be the first black-owned brewery or whatever. And your answer seemed to be the same way. It was like, I just happen to also be a woman. First and foremost, it's all about the beer. I just happen to also, be a woman. So I love that you said it that way.
Yep, exactly. And the work isn't done yet, and I do want to highlight it, and I do want to be a role model. But I think by, showing up to these things and, credit to, some of the people out there, especially I think my age, group, our age group, has done so much better about being more inclusive and seeing that people come from different places, and it's just not the old club that it used to be. You know, it's when I first started brewing, 12, 13 years ago, I think it's 13 years ago now, I was 6 female brewers in the whole state. Like, I could name them all, and in just 12 years, I don't know them all, and that's a good thing, right? Like, I don't know every single female, and I think that that's finally, work is not done and is not equal yet, but I think almost every brewery around here has, a either non-binary or, female on staff in the back of the house. Like, I think it's probably at least 50%, which I think is incredible. And it's nice to not just know everybody. Again, there were 6 of us. We did a collab. There were literally 6 of us. And there are only 2 of us are still in beer. So, not everybody lasted. It wasn't, maybe a friendly place or wanted to start families. And at that point wasn't, looked at like that 2 things that you could do. But I think that, again, that's gotten so much better.
Yeah, I think so too. And I look forward to seeing what the future holds when it comes to, just the diversity in the brewery scene, and obviously the diversity in people who come to the breweries as well. So it's not just, a bunch of us bearded white guys is all hanging out, drinking beer together.
Yeah, like look at sniffing it. It's mosaic, the more diversity we get in there, the better off we're all going to be. And I think it's, again, a lot of work to still do, but I think it's getting better. We got to celebrate some of the small strides we've made, even if they are small, and realize that doesn't mean that, we've solved it all yet at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. Small steps, end up adding up to big steps in the end. So. Exactly.
So yeah, it takes, again, people doing podcasts and people doing interviews and looking for that diversity in the people that they interview. That's a huge step. That's a big thing, and not just interviewing them because of, what they look like or whatever, actually interviewing them to get the substance. And I think that has really helped as well. I mean, one of the first interviews I remember, big interviews that I had, and it was with John Hall, who's an incredible interviewer, an incredible person, for Craft Beer and Brewing magazine. And I had like a pretty long interview, and we got through the entire interview, and he never once asked me about being a woman. And I just thought it was the first time that had ever happened to me. And after the interview, I was like, I just want to thank you for like not asking about that. It's not something that I've ever, up until that point, it was literally 50% of what I'd be asked about. I mean, 50%. I mean, no joke. Like, it was like the only thing I'd be asked about, the only panel I'd be asked to be on, the only thing that seemed to be interesting about me or about what I knew. And it was the first time that hadn't happened, and it was just a cool feeling to know that there are people out there that, okay, let's get past that. They actually wanted to know what the content about beer was that I knew. And yeah, it was the first time that it ever happened. And it was cool. So, we're getting there. A little at a time.
Now I feel like a real piece of shit for asking.
No, I think you should. I think it's important to ask it, but you know what I mean? It's just a piece of the puzzle. And I think drawing attention to it isn't necessarily a bad thing. But again, like until that point, it was literally the only thing I'd ever been asked. Like at all. And it was asked in like very condescending way, not in the way that you asked. It was asked in a way like, what's it like being, I'm like, well, my vagina doesn't stir the mash. Like it's kind of the same as everybody else's, like it was, I just, I'm good. Like I have other things to say, but yeah, up until that point, it was almost everything I'd been asked all the time. And in just like the most generic way possible too. Like not even in a thoughtful, like, where do you think we're headed going? Or, it wasn't about, my experiences. It was more about just, again, the same question over and over and over and over again. I think there's so many better ways, to talk about your past, how you were brought up, how you ended up in the beer industry. Like those things can all allude to, was it a traditional path or was it a traditional path? How did you get here? And I think that there are just more interesting ways to talk about it, that give you more insight into like an actual person instead of just into what they, look like or whatever. So
Right.
anyways, yeah, I think you did just fine.